Hey, what's up, guys? Back for another video this week. Not sure if you could tell, but definitely not feeling 100% today. Wow. I would say if I had a battery meter, my battery would probably read about 3%. So, just running on fumes right now. But committed to making these videos every week, which is I guess you could say a lesson to me or a note for myself that perhaps I should maybe re-record or pre-record. Yeah, that would be a better way of saying it. Pre-record a couple of videos, just have them stashed for a day like today, when I'm just not feeling the best and could still post weekly, right? But nonetheless, we definitely want to provide you some valuable content. So just want to talk to you about a few things that's been running through my mind. I think no matter where you are in life, there's always there's always someone more successful than you, but there's always probably more than one, but there's always a group of people that would love to trade places with you, right? So I think as you, especially on this financial journey, whether you earn 100,000, $1 million, or 100 million, or even a billion, there's always somebody that's got a little bit more. And again, like I said, there's always people that would love to trade places with you at any of those levels, right? So sometimes for me personally, it is difficult to brag. And I wouldn't even say brag, but to feel as though I'm successful per se, because I'm always looking to get to the next level, to get to what I have, to that vision in my mind that I have, and realizing that probably by the time I get there or as soon as I get close to it, I'm probably going to see something bigger, better, or just have a new idea of what's possible and off to the races I go again, right? But I think it's important to not necessarily spend all the time in the world reflecting, but I think sometimes it is important to share the lessons you've learned up to where you're at, right? Because I would say the journey from thousandaire, right? Just earning four figures a month to six-figure earner to millionaire and beyond to multi-millionaire, right? Possibly billionaire, right? Or worth, several hundred million, right? Which is different than a single-digit millionaire, right? Those are, you will be a different person if you're going to sustain that type of financial abundance or wealth. And so some of the things I would say from a young man, and I'll say young man being like 18, first year in college, I graduated high school at 17, just had to make that note. But I would say for one, vocabulary has certainly changed over the years. It's hard to identify with the young man that I was when I graduated high school. For me personally, someone that used a lot of profanity, someone that regularly dropped the N-word, someone that referred to women as the B word, pretty regularly back then. I listened to a lot of rap, hip hop, back then I think 50 Cent, T.I., G-Unit, those were the really big time rappers, I guess could say during that time. Jay-Z, right? Beyonce was still relevant, believe it or not, even back then. But it was more of Destiny's Child than just Beyonce solo by herself, right? There was still the group going dynamics back then. But I listened to a lot of that stuff, addressed, I guess you could say, in a manner that was consistent with hip hop culture during that time, right? And so I would say also during that time, I probably had a stronger, I don't want to say belief, or I would say a stronger awareness of racial tensions or racism, if you will. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. But yeah, I was definitely just a young guy that was I wouldn't say graduating high school, I didn't necessarily have the highest ambitions in the world. You know, I certainly did not. Um, I had no dreams of becoming a millionaire. I didn't even think that was possible for myself. I didn't even. I don't even think I wanted to like. Well, I would say I wanted, but I don't even think I had a goal of like one day even owning like a Mercedes Benz or you know, just one of these luxury vehicles. You know, I just figured those were pipe dreams, right? You know, all of my environment, everyone's surrounded me during that time. I mean, you did good if you were in the military and you know owned a Ford Mustang or Chevy Camaro. You know, those are cars now I wouldn't even dare consider even purchasing. You know, I don't think you can. Well, I mean, you could give me one, but I wouldn't buy one. That's for sure. Even on a discount or a sale, I wouldn't buy one other than if there was such a great deal that I could make a profit by selling it immediately, I would do it. But other than that, I don't really even notice those type cars. And that's just my personal preference. You know, no disrespect to you all that if you know that's your dream car, it's your dream car. But to me, I've driven those vehicles and I've driven much nicer vehicles, and I can tell you that the quality and craftsmanship is severely lacking in those. I remember, you know, I was curious before about the Mustang, and man, I remember the first time I rented one, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a bucket, right? So it's just a bucket with a motor in it. There's no sophistication to it. There's no luxury. There's no class to it, if you will, right? And there's other vehicles that are just as fast or faster, but they've got some class to it. They got some luxury in it. They got some features in it. They got some suspension to it, and it can handle higher speeds a lot better than that vehicle, and it feels just a wholly different driving experience. But anyways, you know, I thought that was success at the time, you know. So to arrive where I am now, I would say the big change was doing everything that I was told during that time. You know, I joined the military. You know, I went to college, didn't really go to class. Found out it's very hard to pass class if you don't go. So with that, I always tell people with the student loans and things, hey, you know, I don't really have much sympathy for them. Primarily because I was offered the same thing. You know, people offered me, you know, student loans. People told me, hey, you know, you can get this loan, you can stay in college, and then I had lost my scholarship because of my grades. And I just remember walking up to the offices and people telling me, hey, man, you can get a student loan, you can stay, you know, we'll pay for food, we'll pay for classes, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember my first thought was, well, how do I pay this back? You know, like how am I going to pay back $50,000? I don't have a job, you know, not nothing that pays that type of money, right? And they're like, oh, well, you know, when you graduate, you're gonna, you know, with your degree, I was studying IT, so you get, you know, you got an IT degree, you'll make $50,000, and I remember thinking like, from where, from who? I mean, you know, it sounds good, but you know, 2 years, especially, you know, to a young man, 17 years old, right? 2, 3 years, I'm like that's a long ways away. I'm like, how do you even know what's going to be happening then, right? Like, how are you so certain that you know some company's going to pay me $50,000, right? You know, can you guarantee me that? You know, like you give me a contract where they say, hey, you get this degree, we'll pay you this much. I'm like, you're just telling me that, but you can't guarantee that. But this debt is guaranteed, and so even as a young man, you know, I was at least smart enough to know, like, hey, the student loan is it's a bad deal, right? I, I don't have a guaranteed way of paying it back was my problem, right? It didn't make sense to me. And so I ended up joining the military, and that was the best thing I knew at the time. And keep in mind, guys, you know, just for, I guess could say, to give you proper context, YouTube did not exist back then, okay? Facebook was brand spanking new. Like you had to have a college email address to get an account on Facebook for relative, you know, to give you context, right? There was no such thing as YouTube. There was no such thing as Instagram, Twitter, X, none of that stuff existed, right? Even the iPhone, it didn't exist yet. The iPad, it didn't exist, right? the iPod was the newest thing smoking back then, right? So all of this, knowledge about being an entrepreneur or, selling stuff on Amazon wasn't even what it was. I don't even think Amazon.com existed in 2005. I mean, you could double check, but if it was certainly just selling books. They weren't what they are today with Prime and Prime. Amazon Prime didn't exist yet. Like none of the stuff that we take for granted nowadays, and we go, oh, well, got all this information, got all these ideas. Everybody wants to be influenced. None of that stuff existed 2005 when I graduated high school, right? So as much as I knew and the exposure I had, it was, either you were gifted with God-given talents as an athlete, right? And you knew by high school whether or not you were that guy or that girl, right, that was going to go to college. Because, sorry, I got some guys here working in the background. But you knew that you were going to be that person because they were already recruiting you, right, to be at Division I college or not, right? So you kind of knew by high school whether or not you were going to be a pro athlete or at least have the opportunity to take one step closer to go pro, right? So if you weren't getting college scholarships, granted, there's a few people that are exceptions to that rule, right, that made it. But for the most part, if recruiters weren't banging down your door as a high school senior, then you knew, hey, okay, athletics is not my gift, that's not my path. So after that, it was, hey, you either go to college, get a degree, get a good job, or you go to the military, or you go be a fireman, a policeman. That was your options. Or you go be a criminal, career criminal, and hope for the best, right? But we all knew where that ends up eventually. So that was the options that I was aware of or knew about graduating high school. So I didn't really have very high ambitions as far as, what I have today and what I've accomplished thus far in life. And so I would say doing all of that, going to college, not really going to class, not really focusing, that kind of forced me to have to go to the military because, the jobs that I wanted to get a place, but my parents really, when you're young, places want you to have credit. My parents didn't really want to co-sign for me. They didn't really want to help me as far as, getting my own place and things like that. So I just felt frustrated. So I felt like, the best thing to do was just go to the military because, again, that's all I saw. It was the only exposure I had to where people seemed to be able to take care of themselves, had their own place, they had their own vehicle, be able to put food on the table. That's what I saw from doing the military. And granted, my father was a retired military, so everybody around my neighborhood was either retired military or active duty, right? So that's what I saw, and that's what I did. And in hindsight, I don't know that was the best move, but again, that was the best information I had at the time, so I made the best decision I could make with the information I did have. But long story short, I ended up in the military, and I did what I was supposed to do as far as there. I was, top 10%. I got all the bonuses. I got all the fast promotions. But I really could not live how I wanted to live in there. It was still very much a paycheck to paycheck type of lifestyle. And I really had to make money outside the Navy, day trading, doing stocks, network marketing, those type of things to really travel or to just go on a trip the way I wanted to, right? And so that was what kind of led me to getting introduced to network marketing. And I'm not a huge fan of network marketing today, but what I will say is people do make money there. Don't kid yourself. People do make money in network marketing. And I think they're excellent for personal development, understanding that, you need a certain mindset, you need a certain skill set to make and earn a high income. And then also being around people that want a little bit more out of life. What I will say is that long term, I don't think network marketing is the answer for anyone unless you are the owner of the company, because I've just seen it too many times where someone can be earning 6 figures a month, 100,000 a month, 200,000 a month I've even seen. And then overnight, the company will change the compensation plan and they go from 200,000 a month to zero, literally. So yeah, you can make money in network marketing. Don't anybody kid you. I just told you, people make it 200,000 a month. But the downside is you're not the owner of the business. The owner is the owner of the business, So therefore, it doesn't matter how large of organization you build, how well you do, or how well you follow the system, how big you build it. At any day, they can flip a switch and change that comp plan, and all of a sudden you back down to zero, and you have no control over that. So I would say that's the biggest downside I've seen with network marketing, and I would say unequivocally, I don't care how good you are with it, how much you work, how good you are producing. That day will come, and it always comes, where the company will change the comp plan for what benefits them, and your income will overnight drop like a rock out of the sky. It'll plummet, and all your hard work goes out the door, and now you got to start all over again, right? And so that I would say is a downside of network marketing. The benefit though was I got introduced to what's called personal development. And if you don't know what that is, it's essentially just I would say a lifelong study of learning to have a better mind or a better, well, let me put it in today's world instead of just using old terminology. I think of it like an update on your iPhone, right? Your mind is the phone per se, right? But there's software that you can upgrade to that will allow your phone to do, features that it couldn't do before, right? It's got the same hardware, but now with this new software, you can do things that you couldn't do before, right? And so your mind, it works the same way. Like your mind, you could think of it as the iPhone, and your mindset, you can think of it as like the software, right? So personal development is a process of updating that software of your mind so that you can do things that you couldn't do before. And that is whether it's skill, let's say learning a new language, whether it's learning how to sell, learning how to market yourself, learning how to manage other people, how to delegate, leverage business through people, whether that's the skill of negotiation, whether it's learning how to find deals, right? All of those are skills that you can learn, right? And then I would say personal development is also opening the mind or opening the vision of your mind as to what's possible for you, right? Because for someone, if you could tell them, hey, one day you can earn $100,000 a year, that might be believable. But if you told them one day they could earn $700,000 a year, that might not be believable for them, right? If you told some people, hey, if you one day could earn $7 million a year, they might go, well, that's impossible, right? Or if you told someone, hey, it's possible that you could earn $70 million a year consistently, they might go, well, that's just too big. That's too much, not for me. Got the wrong guy, got the wrong girl, right? So personal development is upgrading or updating that mind of what's possible, but it's also learning the habits of people that have this certain lifestyle or are able to afford these things, what they do on a daily basis, what they don't do, and learning those things. So I got introduced to, the Jim Rohns, the Les Browns, the Tony Robbins, the Zig Ziglars, the Brian Tracys, the John C. Maxwells, even the Eric Thomas, right? I don't know if I said Tony Robbins or not, but yes, Tony Robbins, Earl Nightingale, right? So on and so forth. And so it was the first time that I really learned about people making a large income outside of entertainment. And what I mean by that is you weren't an athlete and you weren't an actor or actress, right? But you're just a quote unquote regular person that was able to figure out how to make a large income. And so that was the first time I saw that. And so that gave me, different drive, different ambition. And so with that, I started changing the music I listened to, right? I stopped listening to new rap, new hip hop, started cutting that out. Started cutting out the profanity, right? I would always say I've had a walk with Christ. I will say that I'm not, I don't know that I can call myself a saint, but I will say I have been on a roller coaster where there's times where I feel like I'm a little bit closer, and I feel like there's times where I feel like I'm a little bit further away than I should be, But I will always say that I've always had a belief in Christ, never denied my belief in Him or my faith in Him. But I can't say I've always been obedient either to everything that His Word says. But I'll leave it at that. But with that being said, I'll say that I did start finding myself a little more disciplined. Um, and then I would say my desires changed as far as what I wanted. I actually did want the nice house. I did want the nice cars. I did want the nice clothes. I did want to be able to take trips in style. And so I started setting about, this search of, okay, well, how do people that have this type of lifestyle that have built it from scratch, right? Because I don't want people that came from a trust fund or from a well-to-do family. I want people that built it from the ground up. What do they do? And what do they do differently? What are their habits? And how did they build it from the ground up? And which person or thing that was able to get this accomplished, whose path can I follow, basically, right? So I was looking for that. And I ended up finding it. And it was actually in real estate, in real estate sales. Um, I've met people through the coaching program that I'm in that where there's people are earning six figures, multiple six figures, $500,000, 700,000. I met people earning $4 or $5 million a year. Gentleman I'm aware of is earning $1 million a month, right? Multiple millions, and these are people. They have Rolls Royces, they have the Rolex, they've got the custom suits, you name it. And so it's just like, wow, um, this is where I want to be. It was like an old boys club, and that showed me what it was to be a millionaire, what it was to be a multiple six-figure earner, and what they do. And I will tell you, social media is great for giving you exposure to certain lifestyles and things. But I'll also say take it with a grain of salt, because time and again, I can watch social media, I can watch, Instagram, YouTube, X, all that stuff. And if you look on there, everybody is young, we'll say in their 20s or 30s. They're all fit and shape, the best shape of their life. They all got 6, 8, 10, 12 pack abs, right? They're all ripped. Every girl is, got a Coke bottle figure. And they're all got, Gucci bags, Chanel bags. They're all taking trips to Santorini, Greece. They're all going out there to, was it not Cabo, but I forget the Maldives or Maldives. They're all going to the Maldives, right? Everybody's going to the south of France, right? Everybody's in LA, going out to the show. I forget the show out there that everybody goes to. Coachella. Yeah, everybody's going to Coachella, right? Everybody's in Miami for spring break, etc. You guys know the lifestyle. Everybody's got a Lamborghini Urus, right? Everybody's got a Rolls Royce truck. Everybody's flying private in jets, right? And they're all in their 20s or 30s, every single one of them. And what I'm telling you is, don't get caught up in that. It is possible, and some of them really do live that. I'm not saying everybody's a fraud, but what I'm telling you is, go to a private airport. Go to the Lamborghini dealership. Go to Fort Lauderdale, go to Boca Raton, go to Scottsdale, Arizona, go to New York, go to even DC, right? Go to these places, Dallas, Atlanta. Go to these places where there's a lot of money, and you will see more times than not, the majority of the people that have this money are not in their 20s or 30s. And I'm not saying that it's not possible or that you shouldn't aim for it, or that's not the point. The point is, just understand that social media paints the picture one way and reality is different. Go to an upscale restaurant, go to the Ruth Chris, go to the Nobu's, and sit in there for a weekend, and just a regular weekend. Don't go there for Mother's Day or Easter, right? Go there for a regular weekend out the week, or just a regular weekday. See who's in there. It's not the social media influencers that you see for the most part. It's regular people. So just be mindful that, yeah, social media is great for exposure and giving you ideas and things, but don't get so lost up in it that you don't have a realistic view of reality. is what I'm saying. Because when you go to these places and you experience these things for yourself, you find out that 95 to 98% of the time, the people that you see on the gram, on YouTube, you do not see those type people when you actually go to the private airport, or when you actually fly in first class, or when you actually go to an exclusive restaurant. You'll see that's not what the clientele actually looks like. It's regular folks, a little bit, generally, usually a little bit older. More times than not, it's families, right? And it just does not reflect what you see on social media. So just keep that in mind. But anyways, being in this room, I started realizing, for one, and the reason I bring that up about social media is that, for one, a lot of multiple six-figure earners, a lot of multimillionaires I have met that I know personally, they do work hard. Now, it might not be manual labor, because there's a difference, right? They're not out digging ditches all day, right? But they do put in a good solid 8 to 10 to 12 hours per day, especially in the beginning of their careers. Most of them that I know have at least a 2 to 3 year time period where they're working 8, 10, 12 hours a day consistently, 4, 5, 6 days a week, to build the system that they have, to build up the reserves that they have, to have enough money to hire employees and things. Of the autobiographies that I've read of people that were business builders, meaning the multi-billionaires, or the people worth at least several $100 million, if not billion. Those people work like crazy in the beginning, right? And they work their whole life. So why did I bring that up? Social media makes you feel like if you're not earning six figures a month by working 2 hours a day, 3 days a week, and sitting on a yacht, that you haven't got it figured out yet. You need to buy this course, or you need this right coaching, or you need this right mentorship, or you need this right access or exposure. And the truth of the matter is, for the people that do live that type of lifestyle, they've been doing what they've been doing for 15, 20, 30 some years in most cases. And they built a huge business, and they've worked hours, right? And the men that I'm aware of that built these big businesses, especially the founders, sometimes they have gotten sick to their and when I say sick to their stomach, I'm not saying that figuratively. I mean, like, literally in the hospital with shingles, with stress complications, like where the doctor's like, hey, if you don't, shut this down, or if you don't slow this down, you're going to die, or you're going to be, seriously injured for life, because of the stress that you're putting on your body, because of the hours that you're working, or just because of how high stress or high strung you are right now. Right? I mean, these guys literally are in the hospital, on the hospital bed, to really have to make a change or a pivot. So only bring that to say that, I've learned that, no, you don't have to work yourself to the bone, right? You don't have to, sell your soul. But there is a period of time where, if you want to earn this type of money consistently and not, just make a lot of money one year and fall off the wagon, you're going to have to accept the fact that you're going to have to put in a good 2 or 3 years where you're just working consistently a lot of hours and doing things that you may not necessarily enjoy doing, if you want to enjoy that type of income and lifestyle and set it up to where you can continue to grow from there. And like I said, the people that I'm aware of that do have the multiple millions, they do keep working, right? They don't just, do 2, 3 years of high income and then all of a sudden sell off into the sunset. They keep working, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And somewhere in that 10, 15, 20 years, they're able to, kind of pull off the gas a little bit and keep going. But they certainly do work, and they don't quote unquote retire and just do nothing the way media would paint. So that's something that I've come to accept and learn. They also do prioritize, buying assets, sure, real estate, businesses, but I've also found that a lot more of them, the high income comes from their core businesses, meaning, like, if they're in sales and they're selling real estate, then they have a real estate team or real estate brokers. They don't go out and just start a basket weaving company that's completely different from what they do, right? And even the ones that I guess could say, I think of someone like a Ren Jones. This guy owns Vulcan 7. And if you don't know that, it's a phone dialing service. But long story short, he was a real estate agent. He found out that he had a great way of finding phone numbers of homeowners that he was trying to call, and he gave it to a couple of his fellow realtor friends. And he said, "Man, this is the best. This is the best sources of how I would say it, the best source of numbers that we've been able to find. Where are you getting this information from?" And he was able to start a business from that. So his business now is essentially providing phone numbers for people, for realtors to call. But the point is, that's his lane, right? He didn't go out and try to become Elon Musk and say, well, I'm going to put a rocket on the moon, even though I've been selling real estate for the past 5, 10 years, right? So I found a lot more of these guys as well. Their core business or their businesses are usually verticals or integrated with what they're already doing, right? And that's where their multiple millions come from. And then real estate becomes sort of this passive income, sure, but it's not the primary income, right? It's kind of like a backup, if you will, or it's kind of like gravy on top of the rice, right? It's the icing on the cake, if you will, right? And tax deductions and benefits and all that, of course, but the primary business is what's driving everything. So that is something that I've learned. Let's see what else. I want to talk about habits that I've dropped, right? So when I mentioned race, growing up, granted, my father grew up in the 50s before the civil rights movement, right? So he grew up in a segregated South in Florida, and so I'm fully aware of what black-white relations were in America, especially in the South, how slaves were treated, and what rights we had, what we didn't have. But I've also learned that, or experienced that, a lot of times people that would identify themselves as black or consider themselves to be black, we as a whole spend a lot more time worried about whether something's, because I'm black, or whether it's racism, rather than just realizing that, for one, racism overall will never be eradicated because it's a condition of the heart, right? It's like saying we're going to get everybody in the world to like each other. There's somebody that you don't like today just because you don't like them, and they didn't do anything right or wrong. You just don't like them. Their personality, you don't like their energy. You're just not interested in the things that they're interested in, and they would like to be around you, but you're like, I don't want to be around you. It's okay, right? So one, everybody's not going to like everybody. That's just unrealistic. And then two, it's understanding that as a black person in America, we have so much opportunity today. Guys, like I'm reading right now, I'm reading the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. If you don't know, he was a abolitionist. He escaped slavery multiple times, bought his freedom multiple times as a slave back in the early 1800s, and spoke out against slavery, obviously, as a former slave in America. And guys, like the freedom that you have today to say what you want, to say what you think, to go out and march to a Black Lives Matter, or to have a DEI conversation, or to have an affirmative action conversation, or to say we're not equally represented, blah, 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 and somebody actually listen to you guys. Like, I'm reading this guy's autobiography, and it's really painting the picture for me. Like, even, forget the pre-civil rights where we were quote unquote free, but, we were separate but equal, right? We weren't equal, but we were separate, but we still had, our own property and land per se. I'm like, going back to slavery, I'm like, man, we were looked at as property, right? And I'm reading stories about slave owners, murdering other slaves, and there's not even an investigation, there's not even an arrest. I mean, just imagine that. And you can say what you want, you can think what you want nowadays. You can watch a video of a, police officer gutting down, a black man or whatever, and you can say, oh, he was innocent or whatever. And I'm not here to say whether he was or right, because there's so many different stories. I'm not thinking of one specific. But my point is, there's an uproar. It goes all over the news. It goes worldwide. Everybody's talking about it. People rioting in the streets, right? And truthfully, if you actually follow up on these cases after all the hoopla is over, right? you will find that if more times than not, that if that officer was actually wrong, they are convicted, or they are forced to, or they are fired pending investigation, and they do receive criminal sentences in some cases. So no, they don't get to walk scot free, but the judicial system just takes time, and that goes for anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. You commit a crime today, you might sit in jail, and they might hold you in prison for a year or two, depending on severity. If you commit murder, then yeah, obviously, but it takes a few months, 6 months to a year, to really get a court case for something of that magnitude, right? So yeah, the outcry first 2-3 weeks is, oh my gosh, another black man gunned down, blah blah blah. But nobody talks about a year later, when the actual court case happens and the judge actually sentences the officers, right? Nobody mentions that, right? It's a side note, it's a footnote, because that doesn't stir up your energy. But my point is, that is the case. But during the slavery days, you weren't even looked at as a human being. You were looked at as property, right? And so I only bring it up to say that, considering that you were like considered property, not even a human being, you didn't even have rights to vote. You weren't even allowed to read. To fast forward today, you can say what you want, but President Obama would have qualified as a Negro to be a slave in the 1800s. I guarantee you would have been a slave. There wouldn't have been like, oh, well, he was born in Hawaii, or oh, he was born in Africa. You can say whatever you want. His color is brown, and that would have made him a slave in the early 1800s, period. So now to be president of America, whether you liked him or not, he was a black guy. So I look at all that, and I say all that to say that you have more opportunity than you ever had before. Is there still racism? Yes. Is there still sometimes maybe opportunities don't go in your way? Sure. But I would say there are enough black millionaires, multi-millionaires, whether it's athletes, whether it's entertainers, whether it's business owners, whether it's in sales, whether it's real estate investors, that if you want to become that, you can. The flip side of that, I will say, is that we also, because we're so focused on color, we eliminate the fact that a lot of times we just had a bad experience from somebody that just didn't do their job. And I learned this by living in different places like Hawaii, visiting places around the world, being around a lot of Caucasian people. And this was from my own observations, and I used to think that everything was, because I was black. Yeah, I used to be that guy too, right? And then I would hear these white people talking about, this poor shopping experience that they had, or this poor dining experience that they had, and the waiter or the waitress hardly greeted them. And I was like, wait a minute, you guys experienced that too? And then it shifted my whole perspective to going like, well, maybe it wasn't because I was black. Maybe that restaurant just had poor service, right? Like I used to go, oh, well, they didn't acknowledge me, must be because I'm black. I don't think black people can afford to eat here, blah, 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 blah. And you just go down this tangent that you're taught. And then you hear a white person talking about it, just complaining the same way you would to their friends. And then you realize, like, wait a minute, the white people had it? So now you can't say it's because you're black. Now you have to think like, well, maybe that restaurant just has poor service. Maybe their waiter or waitresses don't know how to greet people. What a thought, right? So I've experienced that so many times over and over again. So I realized that a lot of the things that we would love to paint as racism, more times than not, is just somebody not doing their job. Maybe someone just having a bad day. They just don't like anybody, right? It wasn't just you, the black guy. They did it to the white guy and the white girl and the Mexican guy and the Mexican girl and the Asian guy and the Asian girl. They did it to everybody, not just you. And then I also realized that, the poverty, the mindset of not having enough, of feeling like the system's rigged against you, it's not exclusive to black people. Hawaiian people, they feel that way. Mexican people, they feel that way, right? Asians, to my knowledge, as far as I can tell, they don't. But they don't have this, but every, I guess could say, low income community that I've been around, they all have this, the system is against me or us. And therefore there's nothing I could do about it. They have this victim mindset. And that's something I let go. And I realized that there's a lot of people, especially immigrants, that come to this country with nothing. And their mindset isn't, I'm a victim. Their mindset is, if I just get the opportunity, if I just get the chance, I'm going to work and I'm going to work and I'm going to work and I'm going to build and I'm going to create. And they do. And that's how the first generation, second generation, that's how they become multimillionaires. It's not multimillionaires, this is how they consistently make multiple six figures year after year and sustain their family and they're well to do, right? And so I had to give up that, I guess could say that victim mindset of, everything was being, racist against me. So I let that go. And it served me well, very well. And truth be told, if we're honest, even in slavery days, there were white slave owners, but there were also white homeowners that helped Harriet Tubman on the Underground Railroad. Best believe she wasn't hiding in Negro houses, okay? She was hiding in white folks' houses. And those white folks were, I guess you could say, just as bold as Harriet, because if they were found out by their counterparts, they would have been hung at the stake just like a Negro slave. So they were free people that saw an injustice and risked their lives to try to help do what they could to help people escape. When they didn't have to, they could have just turned a blind eye the way many did, but there were some that didn't. And there were some that were willing to risk their lives. So to look at every person that way and think that they're not. And I'll tell you, I've done business with every color under the sun. I have not made my six figures. I can't wait till say when it's seven, but I have not made my multiple six figures with all black people. I can tell you that. I've made it with white, black, Indian, Asian, right? I've done it with multiple races, mixed, Hawaiian, Polynesian. I've done it with some races that you would think would not do business outside of their own race, right? And I'm talking like first generation Chinese people that, are traditionally very much about their own race and, do not want to do business with non-Chinese people. I've done business with them. And I will just say that it's all in your head, right? If you're open to people and you're neutral and you don't come with preconceived notions, then a lot of times you will find that there's a lot more opportunities out there than what you might think. And you may find that a lot of people are also a lot more neutral about things than what you think. And then you'll also find that there's a lot of people that just don't care either way. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but there's just a lot of people that are they're not worried about you as a black man or a black woman or non-whatever. They're just trying to figure out how to get along and pay for their bills and take care of their own family, period. That's just all they're worried about. They're not worried about the color of your skin. They're not worried about who won the Super Bowl, didn't win it. They're just focused on trying to take care of their family and doing the best they can. That's all they got the bandwidth to worry about. So when you talk to them, you realize like, wow, they don't really care about all of that stuff that like you do, right? So that's something I definitely had to let go. Where you eat at, where you dine at, I'm not going to say you never will find a millionaire at McDonald's, but I will tell you that for the most part, you will not find people consistently earning a high income that consistently eat McDonald's. It's just poor diet, right? So they do pay attention to their diet, right? And so that's something I've started doing. I started walking more as a part of my weight loss, and I've added walking almost at least 4 or 5 times a week as a lifelong thing. So I started walking 30 minutes to an hour a day. That matters a lot. Keeps up with your health. Started focus on diet. And when I say diet, I'm not talking about a 3-month diet or a 3-week diet. I'm talking about lifelong changes, right? And so the places that I dine at now, I'm almost to the point where I only will dine at high-class restaurants. And it's not from a perspective of, Chili's is beneath me, or I would never eat at Applebee's ever again or anything like that. But it's just the quality of the food. And, as I get older, I found that, hey, maple syrup on pancakes, it goes better than corn syrup on pancakes, right? Maple syrup is natural. I like pancakes, but there's only a certain type of restaurant that's going to serve you maple syrup, or even have options maple syrup, right? And those are going to be your higher end restaurants. Um, you get a steak at Texas, was it Longhorn Steakhouse? I think it is. You can get a ribeye there, and you can get one at Ruth Chris, or you can go to Morton's. And all three will say ribeye, but you taste them, and you will taste that there's a difference in the quality. It's just there just is. All I can tell you is just try them, and you'll see that the steak at Ruth Chris and Morton's is totally different ribeye than what you're getting at Texas Longhorn. I'm just saying, and that's totally different than the steak that you're getting at IHOP. I'm just saying. So places like Waffle House, hey, man, I used to love Waffle House coming up, but now I might eat there once, twice a year, just as, kind of like a nostalgia, reminiscing type of thing, but not as a regular diet, not a weekly diet anymore. It's horrible. Like, I can literally, as I'm at the table eating, I can feel it gumming up my arteries, clogging up my arteries, right? Like I'm eating the waffle and I'm just like, how did I used to eat this way, right? So diet's another things I've changed as I've grown and matured, right? Um, the way I look at the income possibilities, right? I used to look at, man, it just makes me sick to my stomach to think about it. But I remember, looking at a promotion in the military or getting this qualification in the military and be like, oh man, I get an extra $200 a month, an extra $300 a month. And you're like, oh, that's a car payment, or oh, that'll cover all my gas, or, whatever. And you're like, hey, I'm going to take 3 months to get this qual so I can get this extra $300 or $400 a month payment, and be excited about it. And now I think of like 6 and 7 figures. I go, okay, what do I need to do to earn $500,000 a year? Like, okay, what do I got to do to earn 100,000 a month? How do I get that to 200,000 a month? How do I get to 7 figures, right? Multiple 7 figures, right? So it's a totally different mindset where I'm not trying to I guess you could say climb a rung of the ladder by going, hey, I can make extra $1,000 a month. No, it's going, okay, how do I go from 20, 30,000 a month to 50,000 a month, or to 100,000 a month, right? To 200,000 a month, right? I'm tripling, quadrupling, I'm doubling the annual income or monthly income, right? However you want to look at it, right? So it's understanding that all of that is possible with the right skills and with the right systems in place. And I would say I'm okay with what I have, but also okay with wanting what I want would be a big change. And then I think, what else would I say has changed over the years? I would say reading books. So again, if you want to talk about slavery, slaves were not allowed to read, right? And that's because, man, it's almost impossible for you to be able to read and read about freedom and then think that you're going to, be this good. And I don't know that quote unquote slaves were good, but if you thought they weren't, revolting and rebelling before, then they certainly would be once they really, could kind of get a glimpse of freedom. So you got to think, like, why would a slave owner not want their slaves to be able to read, to gain information, to be educated, right? And it's for purposes of control, power, dominance, right? So I think of it now as like, now that we are quote unquote free, and most of us do know how to read, then it's incumbent upon us to actually read and to learn. And so I read autobiographies of men that have built big businesses. I read skills books on how to sell, how to market, right? And I focus on those things, inspiring stories. Those are the books that I really focus. Like I said, right now I'm reading the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, who was a great orator, public speaker in the 1800s, right? And to me, it's very impressive that he was able to become a free man and to buy his freedom, and to be enslaved, to buy his freedom again during the 1800s, where they, like I told you, like they'll kill a guy, hang him from a tree, shoot him, doesn't matter, and wouldn't even be arrested. Wouldn't even spend a night in jail, right? It just looked at as property. So it was just like, I don't know, like we have harsher penalties for shooting a dog nowadays than we did for slaves back then, which is hard to think about, right? So anyways, for him to be able to become free and be able to speak out publicly and to speak in, Washington D.C. with in front of the president. I think that is just incredible, right? So, anyways, I read books like that and learn, and it gives me different ideas, different strategies, and also gives me real perspective on what it takes to build business, sustain business, investing strategies. Those things I read. Told you about walking more. Told you about changing the music that I listen to. I don't really listen to rap, hip hop at all. Don't really listen much new music nowadays. A lot of old school stuff. Listen to a lot more podcasts, interviews of well-to-do, and I would say not just random, but there's a handful of people. I would say no more than five. I would say people that I guess could say drill deep on their philosophy. So people like Patrick Bet David, Brandon Turner with the Better Life Tribe, um, Dale Walmsley. He's got his own thing. Who else do I follow? There's a couple fitness gurus I follow. As far as with fitness goes, I like Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time guy. But that's it. I really only listen to a handful of people. Myron Golden, right? So I only listen to a handful of people, and I really go in deep on what it is that they talk about and implement their strategies and things. Also, I would say attending events. So that's been life changing with the people that you meet, circles that you get around. So I would say at least attending an event twice a year. And when I say an event, I'm talking about, whether it's a coaching program, whether it's investing conference, whether it's, if you're in sales, real estate sales conference, something like that, where you're getting around people that are like-minded, but also you're learning some new skills or just refreshing the skills that, because we all fall short sometimes, right? And there's always room for improvement, right? I promise you, if Kobe was still playing basketball today and he was alive, he would still be trying to work on something to get better at, right? Or trying to adjust or trying to adapt, right? So going to conferences and things is another thing I would say that I changed, or business conferences, I would say is another change. I already told you about diet, exercise, reading. I would say masterminding is another one. Accountability, that's a huge one. So, I used to be the hey, I'm all that in a bag of chips. I can do it on my own. I've since learned that that's not really how top producers, high performers really operate. Like there's some type of accountability. There's some type of person or system or thing that holds you accountable to what you say you're gonna do and what you should be doing, especially on the days where you don't feel like doing it, right? And so it's not just sheer willpower, right? If you're just doing off of willpower, you're playing a losing battle, right? And so that was a huge game changer for me, was accountability, where for me it looked like I was doing prospecting, so I'd make my calls on a live Zoom with another person that was making their calls. I would text my numbers, write them down. My coach would review them once a week with me, right? So it was accountability. Then I also say mastermind. So I'd have a weekly mastermind where me and other realtors from around the nation, we would get on a call for 30 minutes to an hour, exchange ideas, share the problems that we're having, come up with the answers, things like that. And so I found that association with people that are aiming for the similar goals that you have, some a little bit further along the journey than you, some not quite, that really helps accelerate your growth as well. So I would say looking or intentionally looking for groups of people that have what it is that you want or are aiming for what it is that you want. That is a big game changer too, right? No more just just hanging out because this is your boy from high school, this is just your boy from back in the day, we grew up together, yada, yada, yada. It's now you're meeting people because, hey man, I'm trying to build a business, you're trying to build your business. Okay, what are you learning? What am I learning? What are you implementing? What am I implementing, right? Or, hey man, I want to own 100 units of, real estate apartment, 100 doors or 100 houses or whatever. Okay, well, I'm going to go to a real estate meetup or weekly meetup or conference, and I'm going to, introduce myself to people, and I want to get in a room where the average person there owns 75 to 100 doors or 120 doors, right? I want to get myself in that room and start being around these people to see out what do they do, how do they get to 100 doors, right? So it's also being intentional about networking and being around people. That's something that I've changed as well. And then I would also say philosophies, right? I no longer look at something as too expensive or not affordable, but I look at it more so from the perspective of how can I afford this, right? And not only that, but realizing that I guess you could say I do a flip in my mind where I no longer go, yeah, you couldn't see that. It's supposed to be like that. Yeah, anyways, I no longer go, okay, that's too expensive. Now, there's some stuff where I go, yeah, that price is ridiculous, right? I don't know, I don't know, you could see a bag of chips and you go like $50, like $50 a bag of chips, that's ridiculous, right? But I don't look at it as too expensive because I go, somebody out there can afford it, right? And most people can afford it, right? And so I always try to remember that wherever you go in the world, for the most part, you can, especially in America, you can find $1 million homes for sale. In most states in America, you can find $1 million homes. You can find cars that cost $100,000 in most major cities in America, right? And in any major city in America, you can find a Ruth Chris and a Morton's, and you can find a Bloomingdale's and a Nordstroms, and you can find these places where people are spending this type of money. And so it's a reminder to say, like when you go to Rolex, you really can't buy a new watch from Rolex. Just think about that. There's a 2-year waiting list for Rolex. This is you're talking about watches. I think that start around 10 grand. I don't know if there's a $2,000 Rolex, not that I'm aware of, but I want to say Rolex starts around 10 grand. So a $10,000 watch, somebody would say that's ridiculous. That's too expensive. But there's a 2-year waiting list for it, right? People say housing's not affordable, but you jump on the multiple listing service, the MLS, right? That's where all the homes are listed for realtors, right? That's what Zillow's trying to imitate is the MLS, right? Well, go on there. They're in every major city. I guarantee you there's at least 20 homes that cost over $1 million that are under contract. And if you go in the previous month, I guarantee there's at least 20 homes that cost over $1 million that closed, meaning that they officially sold, they transacted within the past 30 days. Guarantee you in every major city. But someone says it's not affordable. And I guarantee you, in every single one of those cases, you can't name a single person. So that means it wasn't Tyler Perry, it wasn't Oprah, it wasn't Beyonce, it wasn't Jay-Z, it wasn't LeBron James, it wasn't 50 Cent, it wasn't your favorite actress, it wasn't your favorite football player, it wasn't your favorite basketball player. It was somebody that's regular that bought that home, that bought that watch, that bought that car. You have never heard of their name ever in your life. They're not famous. They're not a celebrity. But they live in your city or they live in, the big city near you. And they can afford those things. So I've released the idea that things are unaffordable. I just adopted what my mentor or what my coach, what his mentor told him, which is it's not that it's too expensive or it's not affordable. You just don't make enough. Right? And so I always challenge people with saying, like, if you were earning $1 million a year right now, would you be concerned with whatever it is, right? What gas being $3 a gallon, or would you be concerned about a sandwich at the store being $20 when it used to be $17, right? A house costing $1 million, would you be as concerned about that if you were earning $1 million a year? And the answer is no, you wouldn't be. And now the question is, can you earn $1 million a year? And the answer is absolutely yes. Now, would it be today? Would it be tomorrow? Probably not. But you can develop the skills, you can build a business, you can build the sales that eventually within 2, 3, 4, 5 years time, you can get there. The answers are out there if you look for them. So that's another mindset shift that I've made where I go, how can I afford this? Who already affords this, right? And so I'm already thinking about, I don't even have my Lamborghini yet, but I'm already thinking about jets, right? And chartering them. Now, I imagine when I get the Lamborghini, that'll open doors with the fellow Lamborghini owners, and then some of them will charter jets, obviously, and probably some of them will own a jet, and then I can ask those questions of, how are you able to afford this? How is it makes sense that you could, spend 30, 40, 50 grand on a flight and spend another 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand on this, on the trip and spend 100 grand on the trip total and do this 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year? How do you do that and not go broke, right? I could ask those questions and I'll get the answers when I get to that room. But again, that's a change that I've made over the years where I stopped saying it's too expensive and I started saying, how can I afford it? Who already affords it? Who does this? Who buys this on a regular? And sometimes those questions may just start off with the salesman. Just, hey, sir, man, who do you sell these Rolexes to, right? Who do you sell these Lamborghinis to, all right? Who's your clients for these jets, right? And you can start there, right? And as you earn more income, I would also say, thing that I've started doing was spending money to be in the room, right? So it's no longer about whether or not someone likes you or you like them, but it's earning your seat at the table is how I look at it. So there are organizations or groups, if you will, where you have to have a minimum income to be in the room, right? You got to earn a minimum $500,000 a year to be able to join that group. There are organizations where you have to have a minimum net worth of $2 or $3 million, and you cannot count your primary residence, right? There's such things as being an accredited investor. And so you start learning that there's these rooms where people happily exchange information with you or have the answers that you're looking for, but you've got to reach a certain financial level for them to be even willing to have that conversation with you so that they're not wasting their precious time. So that's another thing that I've learned over the years. And so I think, granted, I didn't mean to go a whole hour, but I don't know. I guess I'm a speaker at heart, I guess, get me to talking, and all of a sudden this energy just comes from nowhere. So I promise you I was on 3%. But those are the things that I've changed since, that have gotten me to where I've gotten to. And then also I would say paying a little more for experience, meaning pay a little more to have dinner at a nice restaurant. Pay a little more to stay at a nicer hotel. Don't always go with the cheapest motel or economy inn. Actually, I would never even stay at those places nowadays, but I would say go to the Embassy Suites, the Homewood Suites, and be careful because sometimes those can even be ghetto, depending on the location. But a good location would be a nice experience. But the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton, pay a little extra to get to those places. Go to the steakhouse, get dressed up, and dine, and see what it's like to have that. Fly first class. And when I say fly first class, I'm not talking a 40-minute trip from Columbia, South Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where I'm from, right? So I'm not talking about a 40-minute trip from there. That's nothing. But I'm talking about when you're flying cross country, when you're flying from Charlotte to LA. Fly first class. Pay the extra money, get the first class experience, try it out. I guarantee you it'll change your life. It changed mine when I did it. I was like, I never want to go back to flying economy once I experienced that, right? Try nicer clothes and things, right? You may not love it, but I found that no matter who you are, if you like the attire that you're wearing, you feel better. And it doesn't have to necessarily be name brand, but if it's fitted to you, it's newer, it's cleaner, it doesn't look like it's worn out and been worn 1,000 times, but it's newer, it smells fresh, it looks good, it's pressed, you feel better, you feel more confident, right? The vehicles that you drive, right? Maybe you can't afford the car that you want or the car that you think you would like, but you could rent it for a day. You can go on Turo, especially Turo nowadays, and maybe it's not in your city, but again, any major city nearby, if you look up Atlanta, Charlotte, Miami, I guarantee you go to those type places, Las Vegas, whatever car that you kind of got in your mind, you could find it. And then rent it for a day or two. Go drive it. See whether you like it. Pull up to the places that you would normally go to. Go out to eat. Go to the restaurant. Go to the gym. Go to Walmart. Whatever it is. And I think you'll see that experience. Go to open houses of multi-million-dollar properties when you see them. Right? It doesn't matter whether or not you can afford it. You see, $5-10 million property and they got an open house and it's out on the water. Go check it out. Go look at it. Right? talk to the realtor, ask them, hey, who are the owners? What do they do? How do they afford this, right? And most times not, they will tell you, right? Because most times the realtor, they can't afford the house either, right? They're just selling it, and they're excited about that commission. But the point is, when you do that, you'll start to experience things, and you'll go, I like this, I don't like that, or maybe, hey, I care for this, maybe I don't care for that, or you go, wow, this is really nice, I would like to experience that again. And I promise you, especially on your financial journey, it only will help as you experience those things, because now it'll push you to do what's required to earn income that you want. And not only that, but then as you get there, you'll start learning about investing and getting assets and businesses and things like that, because you'll learn about you don't always want to be working forever, right? You don't always want to be the engine that drives everything. You eventually want to take your foot off the gas, and that's what you hear about with passive income, right? That people are saying. But what a lot of people don't realize is that in the beginning, you've got to build up a lot of active income. You've got to be making, and more times than not, you've got to be making hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to build the passive income to create that type of lifestyle. Now, that's not to say that there's not some people that's, figured out a little loophole where they can make 5-10 grand a month. But again, guys, if you're talking about you want to own Lamborghinis, you want to own Ferraris and Bentleys, and you want to have a house here and a house there, and you want to travel, here or there, you want to fly first class, you want to buy your wife, your girl, a Gucci bag, a Chanel bag, or, Hermes bag, and you want to dine here and there, it's going to take you more than 20 grand, 30 grand a month, right? And when you talk about those numbers, you're not going to do that with zero down, not in the beginning, right? Now, as you get more seasoned, or you build a reputation of being able to be responsible money, somebody will give you that down payment, et cetera. Sure, you can do it with no money down. But in the beginning, yeah, you're going to need some upfront capital, right? You're going to have to establish your name, and it's going to be a process just like anything else in life, right? So, yeah, I think went over an hour. Didn't plan to. I thought it was going to be a short video, but once again, welcome to this life of a speaker, right? It can't be short when we try. And speaking of which, that's another thing that I eliminated from my vocabulary for the most part. It's like, I can't, right? And you can see that I immediately thought that when I said I can't. It was just like, I can, but it was just like, I can be short, but I just choose not to, because, I was trying to pour and develop and give you what I've learned over the years. And so I just chose to keep going with it. But again, just keep in mind that those are things I've eliminated. It's, I can't, it's, unaffordable, it's too expensive. I changed it to, well, what does it take? Or maybe I would say I'm not willing to make the time, not willing to prioritize, or I'm not willing to make this a priority, or I'm not willing to do what is required to obtain. But I won't say I can't, right? Very, very little times where I'll say I can't, right? And then, if there's something that is not affordable for me, I would say it's not within my budget right now. I don't earn enough to be able to afford that right now. I don't make enough yet. It's not that I can't afford it. It's like I don't earn enough yet, because that I could change. I could change how much I earn. I could change how much I make, right, to be able to afford that. And then also accepting responsibility, right? So there's a lot of things that may not necessarily be fair, or the certain situations or whatever. Life happens to us all. And the best example I've always used is, if you drive a car long enough, you're going to have a flat tire. It just comes with it, right? There's nothing that you did right or wrong. Is just a part of the driving experience of driving a car. Is that one day you will have a flat tire. And if you don't drive new cars all the time, then one day you may have a dead battery. This is part of the driving experience. And there's nothing bad about it. It just comes with it. And so what I've learned is just take responsibility for what I can do. Rather than saying he, she did this to me, or this or that circumstance, I just go, what can I do about it? What are my personal responsibility, right? And so I would say that's probably the biggest one, is when you take personal responsibility for what you can do and what it is that you did or didn't do, then you feel like you have a lot more control over the outcome. Which you do long term, and I'm not omitting God's presence in this thing, or saying that he doesn't have a will for us, but he does give us free will. And, he does, even in his word, talk about, planting to reap a harvest. You reap what you sow, right? So if you want an apple orchard, then you got to plant a lot of apple seeds, right? But you cannot expect an apple orchard from planting one seed, right? You can expect maybe an apple tree, but not an orchard, right? So if you're going to aim for getting an apple orchard, you got to plant a lot of seeds. And man, I'm trying to think of what's a modern day example of that. Can't think of a modern day example. Sorry, I can't think of a modern day example. But the point is, there's a price to be paid for most things, and you know, you can control whether or not you're willing to pay that price. If you want a fit body, you're going to have to eat a certain way. You're going to have to exercise a certain way. You're not going to be able to eat donuts and waffles and pancakes and sweets every single day and think that you're going to look like, you know, a power lifter, or well, you're not going to look like a bodybuilding competitor. You're just not, right? It's not possible. And so just understanding that there's a lot of things in life that we do get to control what the output is over a extended period of time, right? Day to day, month to month, maybe not, but over extended period of time, we get to control the results, right? And so just understanding that what we do day in and day out, that a lot of times will determine whether or not we get the results we want. And I guess you could say a great example of that is like what people look at as, I don't really care for college, but let's say you're going for a degree, right? Nothing that you necessarily do day one or day two is going to make or break whether or not you get the degree, but it's what you do day in and day out, right? Whether you study, whether you show up for class, whether you're passing exams, right? Whether you're preparing for exams, right? Where you're preparing for assignments, getting assignments, that's really going to determine whether or not you get that degree, right? And so that's kind of how life works, right? It's not a one-day event per se. Now, you can make a negative decision and just understand, and I would say that's something else to understand too in life. Negative results happen a lot quicker than positive results. So example, murder is one that Jim Rohn says. You can make a decision to change your life forever. You can go out and murder somebody today. Man, that's going to get you 10, 20 years, possibly a life sentence, maybe even the death penalty, depending on who, when, what, where, how, and all of that, right? But that's instantaneous. But if you decide today that you want to become a multi-millionaire, there's nothing that you're really going to do today other than play the lottery ticket and win, and win. That's going to turn you into a multi-millionaire, right? So just understanding that the way life works, positive results usually take at least 3 times longer than negative results to show up. So negative results will always come, and you can see it, diet, fitness, exercise, money, it doesn't matter. You miss paying a bill, they put it on your credit report, boom, instant, right? Now you pay the bill the next, but how many months does it take to kind of eradicate that one missed payment, right? So you get it. So just understanding also that negative always shows up faster, larger, whereas positive results typically take a little bit longer, more time, more effort. So hopefully that helps you guys with just some of the lessons I've learned over the years. And I know it wasn't all one central topic, but kind of a collection or a collage of ideas. But I just want to show you some of the things that I've learned, some of the ideas that I've come to accept, and some of the changes that I've made, so that you can understand that, anybody can earn 6-7 figures, but it does require you to become a certain type of person to do that consistently and to keep it. And so when you get outside of, the sports or entertainment industry, right, and you get into business and sales, then you start understanding that there's a certain mentality, there's certain day-to-day actions that you have to take, and it really becomes a skill, and it really becomes a belief, and is this whole thing of ingredients that comes together for you to be able to achieve it. It's just like putting a cake together, right? If you skip a couple ingredients, you might get a cake, but you might not, right? But if you do all the ingredients together, then you're going to get the cake. right? And so it's like no matter what cake you're trying to bake, it's going to have some common ingredients, which is flour, egg, milk, right? Maybe some type of yeast or some type of similar thing to yeast that cause it to rise, cause that bread to rise, right? But it's central, or it's a foundational to all cakes, that you're going to have a little bit of water and flour in the batter, right? That's going to have some type of batter that is exposed to heat, and that heat's going to cause that batter to turn into the bread or to the cake that we want, right? It's a common theme no matter what type of cake you're trying to make, right? And so when it comes to finance, it's the same way. There's going to be some common themes of reading books, being focused. Oh, and another one that's a huge, that reminds me, is cutting out the news. And I know for a lot of people, especially if they've never heard of that, it's a huge when they go, oh, well, how do you stay informed? Yada, yada. There's nothing you could do about what's happening in Palestine. There's nothing you could do about what's going on in Malaysia or Singapore. All right. Somebody got beheaded in Sudan. It's sad, but what can you do about it? Nothing. There's nothing you can do about it. Somebody got abducted in Argentina. There's nothing you can do about it. But it can affect your day. It can tear up your emotions for the day and tear down the energy that you have to go out and create the business that you want, right? So eliminating the news that's negative is huge. Just cutting out the nightly news, the daily news, the morning radio talk show hosts, man, cut all that out. I haven't listened to the news in, man, probably 15 years. I haven't listened to the news, probably since 2008, 2009, I haven't listened to the news, 15, 16 years. And guys, I'm telling you, I haven't missed a thing but a lot of negativity. That's it. And I'm here to tell you, if there's anything major, guys, who could ignore the pandemic, whether you believed in it or not? It was everywhere. It's in your face. If there's a major hurricane coming, they're going to freaking promote that. Everybody's going to talk about it. Everybody's going to ask you about it. But everything else, the politics, this senator, this president, that president right now, the tariffs, are they good, they're bad? Focus on your day-to-day actions that is required to move you forward. In my case, let's say, because right now I'm trying to lose like another 20 pounds, whether Trump has tariffs or not, does not change the fact that I have to pay attention to my calories to lose the weight I want to lose. That I have to walk at least, 10,000 steps a day to 20,000 steps a day to lose the weight that I want. It has no bearing on that. And so many of you, you're so focused on exterior things that really don't affect you more or less day to day. Whether they're tariffs or not, you can't afford to live how you want to live. So you could try to debate with your family, with your friends, and argue and make social media posts about whether or not they should be there and whether you agree with them or not. Or you can go out and talk to more people, build your business, right? Learn how to serve more people and earn more income. And then whether they cause prices to go up or down, you have the money you need to do what you want to do. Right? And so cutting out the news has been great for me. I don't miss it. I never watch the news. I don't care to watch the news. If I'm in a room with somebody or where they're watching the news, I turn it out, put my headphones in, or, I just leave out of the area, right? So I cut out that negativity. And then also complaining. So complaining, murmuring is what the Bible calls it about situations. Even if they are against you, doesn't help. It's focusing on what can I do today, even if it's something little, to turn this thing around, to change the situation around, to change the narrative around, right? What little progress could I make today? And focusing on that instead of all the negative against me. That's how you overcome. So those are all the things that come to mind when I think of, some of the changes I've made over the years, the way I view life that's different now, and, how I've been able to make multiple six figures, and why, I'm working towards 7, and how, how all this got me to where I'm confident that I will be earning 7 figures in the next year or two. When, if you asked me at 17 years old, I would never believe that me would be one day earning even six figures, you know, to now when I'm, you know, making plans to earn seven figures a month, right? I'm envisioning that, I'm looking at that, I'm expecting that within the next 10 years, less maybe. But, you know, to be even thinking about that from where I started, you know, it was a process of becoming, right? And continuously becoming, improving and changing and accepting new ideas, dropping old ones, dropping old habits, picking up new habits, improving better habits, or making certain habits more, you know, a habit, or making certain things a habit, you know, making it consistent. So hopefully that helps you guys. If you got value in this video, please like, share, subscribe. If you have questions on things, please do that. You know, for those of you that have been commenting, I appreciate it. You know, I try to respond to every comment. Granted, it's only a few right now, so it's pretty easy, but one day there'll be more, so it won't necessarily be as easy for me to respond to every single one. But yeah, guys, you know, we'll see you next week on the next video. All right, take care.